been discussing the diabetes drug Ozempic tonight. It's been widely reported to have a beneficial side effect, and that is weight loss, as we've been discussing. Spotlight Sarah Greenoch is with our studio audience, who are pretty keen to ask our experts some further questions. Sarah, take it away.
Yeah, they certainly are, Michael. It's been really obvious being with the studio audience this evening to see that some of the issues have really resonated with people for different reasons. I'd like to introduce you to Justina over here. Now, you've had a really tough time recently. Can you share your story?
Yeah, sure. I just think a takeaway from this is that every situation is unique. In my situation, I have a pituitary brain tumour and I've had 4 surgeries on it, and during that time I've put on over 50 kilos, and I was on Ozempic for 3 months. And then they said, you're not diabetic, you can't take it anymore. So...
Goodness me.
And that's it. So I guess the question to our doctors is, when will this change?
Yeah, Nick, do you want to take that away?
I think hearing stories, just as we've heard, real-life stories where people are suffering because they can't get access to treatment and they should have access to treatment. Yeah. I think the average person won't say, it's your fault. They'll say, look, there is a specific reason, there is a specific treatment, why don't we give it to this person? And I think we should.
What would you say? I mean, clearly you're surrounded by specialists and doctors. I mean, and they can't access it, or they're telling you that you can't take it anymore? No,
they're saying I can't. I've had scripts written out, I've been to the pharmacy and they say you're not a diabetic. We can't give it to you.
Terry Lynn, do you have a view on that?
It's very hard. We've got some of our professional bodies that are telling prescribers as well as pharmacists to not give it out to people who don't have, who aren't on the PBS and therefore, by definition, don't meet the criteria type 2 diabetes. So it's hard because as healthcare professionals across the board, we're being told by our professional organisations to toe the party line.
Well, that leaves patients in limbo here who need it.
It does.
Yeah.
This is neglect. It's not. I mean, this is a terrible situation, and we all see this all the time. But we are struggling because we can put our professional groups together and go to the PBS. We can't get an answer.
Well, send them a link to this tonight if you can. Take it to your specialists and show them that it's critical if you can. Yeah. Sarah?
Thank you for that. The next audience member has decided to make this as challenging as possible with a question at the very back. Actually, I might just pass it over to you.
My question relates to accessibility. I heard there's a rumour that an Australian version of Ozempic is coming. Is that the truth?
It's a good question. Is it being locally manufactured?
I think John might be the best person to answer this.
Ozempic, in the same... The compound, semaglutide, it has been reaching the country from other sources, and it's been made up here in a compounded form, but it's been by compounded pharmacists. The TGA has had a comment about that recently, and they want it to stop. I'm not sure where it's at because I gather it's still available. Right. The dosing and so forth is exactly the same, and I rather suspect it is the same molecule, but we never quite know when it's come from countries that are not necessarily
the good source.
Not the company who made it.
They don't have the same regulatory rules and standards, so I suppose people might be taking a risk by doing that.
Sarah, another question.
Yep. Luckily, this time in the front row. What's your question?
It's not so much of a question, but I've used both Ozempic and also Saxendra, and I have found that Saxendra actually works better for me, and there was no side effects. And I lost about 10 kg with Saxendra, whereas Ozempic, I didn't find any so far, because I guess it's just very beginning. Yeah.
And I guess the question to our experts is that a common experience? Do some drugs work for some people and not for others?
Did you try others, AJ, before?
No.
Straight on to Ozempic. John?
It's important to understand that Saxenda is quite available, and it's a drug that works. And for people that respond to it, they lose an average of about 12% of their body weight. This isn't trivial. So the people who respond to it, and it's not as many as respond to Ozempic and so forth, but there are other drugs out there that can be used, and the responders do well. I suppose what we're really focusing on is this big change into these hormones that seem to be having an effect well beyond what we've had before.
Yeah. What's the cost of this, though? What would be the cost of that other drug that we're talking about here? Is it?
Oh, it's quite high. $300.
3 times the amount.
3 times the amount.
Right.
Saxenda. And it's true. We can't predict with certainty who's going to respond to a medication. It's just as a group of people respond better to Ozempic than they do to Saxenda, but at an individual level, you may actually respond better to Saxenda. And the only way you're going to know that is if you try it. And I think that's what happened in your case. It doesn't mean that you're on the wrong drug. It just means that you've tried a medication that works better than the other one, and it makes sense to continue with the medication that actually works better for you.
All right, Sarah, you're going to the shadows of the crowd there. Who's next question?
It's a real journey over here. There was a lot of response, let me tell you, to Roxy's story, the 2 packages that we saw earlier in the show. Romy has a question about body image.
I do. This is probably for you, Terry Lynn. But I help a lot of Roxys in this world move away from diets and restriction and diet culture. And I suppose the question is there any risk that Ozempic exacerbates this body image issues? I know there's a shocking stat that 9 out of 10 females are dissatisfied in their body. And are there any long-term risks on physical and mental health?
I can answer that in 2 parts. I do believe that when the medication is being used to not treat the complex chronic condition called obesity, then yes, you are at risk of disordered eating, worsening body image, all of those things that you said. Having said that, for some people, and usually at lower doses than is needed to have significant weight loss, that reduction in food noise I find is very helpful for people to actually explore their relationship with food and eating. So it allows a bit of space in their brain to be able to do the psychological work of why did I notice for the first time in my life I left some food on the plate, and why did I feel guilty about that, and why did I have that noise in the back of my head which was a parent saying you must eat everything on your plate and you can't throw it out. So I actually find that in the right hands, in a multidisciplinary team, the medication can actually be a positive thing in that sticky ground between body image and conditions associated with higher body weight.
Having said that, you have to be careful when prescribing that someone does not have a significant eating disorder. Someone who has, for example, a severe binge eating disorder, that's one of the known contraindications for this medication. So you have to be careful, and that's why it's the careful assessment either by a doctor or a multidisciplinary team. So people need to be aware of that. So good question.
Sarah, I think we have time for one more question, but yes, John, did you want to add something?
I was going to say, while I said earlier that people's psychological support doesn't tend to increase weight loss in programs, but it's excellent for dealing with these sort of issues. We need to dive into those body image issues and so forth, and we can't target some target weight that's down there. We've got to target health, function, psychological well-being, quality of life. You can't choose your weight that you'll get down to. We don't choose our weight, and therefore I think psychological assistance for people who are losing weight is really critical if they need it. Not everyone needs it, but it's very important to have.
Sarah.
To end up with Michael, we're going to go to AJ's soul sister, Tracy, because I've noticed there's a bit of a connection going on across the studio here. Tracy, there was something you wanted to say along these lines about body image?
Yeah, as someone who at one point a few years ago had no hope in my life, I thought it was probably at the end of my life. And I've come out the other side after some, really caring, a clever surgeon and some really caring people and health professionals. And, that will never go away. I'll still be on that journey for a long time. But I wanted to say that I'm a member of the Weight Issues Network, and they are a mighty little force and part of the Obesity Collective, and all these wonderful people that are trying to advocate for other people like myself. And I found them last year, and it's just been beautiful to share. And I want to reach out to anyone out there that absolutely thinks they have no hope, thinks they have nowhere to go. Come on board to the Weight Issues Network. They are amazing. We share stories. It's a safe space. And, know that there's help out there for you, I promise. And hopefully you'll too have a better life as well.
You are not alone.
Thank you so much for sharing that again. Here's a question from me. I've never asked the questions all night. Do you weigh yourself?
I don't weigh myself anymore, and I have spent my life weighing myself, and I do not care what I weigh. All I care about is, am I eating the right amount of food? Am I eating the good foods? Am I exercising? And am I staying on my path of good health? And that's it for me. The medicine works, and I'm happy, and I don't care what weight I am or what weight I'm going to get to. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm healthy.
There's a round of applause.
Thank you, God.
Okay, thank you very much. Huge thank you to the audience as well for your honesty, for being here tonight too and joining in this discussion. Hopefully it shifts a bit of the dial. We've learned a bit and can move in a different direction. So thank you all for that, and our experts again. And thanks for joining us for this extra edition of Spotlight. We're going to be back next Sunday night. We'll see you then. Thank you.